Before we begin, I thought it would be fun if everyone lets me know in the comments where they're watching this video from. And while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe. Now, let's start today's episode. Carl Switzer. As a society, we have an undeniable fascination with celebrities. While some people dream of achieving that level of fame, others see it as a nightmare. The intense public scrutiny celebrities face often makes it difficult to view them as ordinary individuals. Their lives are frequently treated as a source of entertainment, and unfortunately, their deaths can become spectacles as well, especially when they result from violence, as in the case of Carl Switzer. Born in 1927, Carl Dean Switzer gained fame as a child actor after landing the role of Alfalfa in the comedy short series Our Gang during the mid-1930s. However, he had no way of knowing at the time that Alfalfa would become the series' most cherished and well-remembered character, portraying the humorous adventures of a mischievous group of friends. After departing from Our Gang in the 1940s, Carl struggled to maintain his acting career. He remained in Hollywood, taking on minor roles in films such as It's a Wonderful Life and working in B-movies. To supplement his income, he also became a dog breeder and trainer. In 1959, he agreed to train a treeing Walker Coonhound, a hunting dog, for his longtime friend Moses, Bud Stilts. The two had originally met while working together on multiple productions at the Corriganville Movie Ranch in California. However, things took a turn for the worse when the dog ran off after a bear, and Carl was unable to track it down. Upon hearing that his valuable hunting dog had gone missing, possibly for good, Stilts insisted that Carl either return the animal or compensate him for its worth. Unfortunately, Carl was in no position to pay. He was already struggling financially and had recently gone through a divorce, leaving him with little means to cover the loss. Instead of paying outright, Carl turned to the local newspapers, placing ads offering a monetary reward for the dog's safe return. Fortunately, the dog was found and brought back. The downside, however, was that Carl had to shell out $35, the modern-day equivalent of about $370, as a reward, along with $15 worth of alcohol, which would be around $160 today. A few days later, on January 21st, Carl was still upset about losing $50 over a dog that wasn't even his. Frustrated, he vented to a friend about the situation, and together they agreed that Stilts should reimburse Carl for the reward money. Determined to settle the matter, the two made their way to Stilts's home in the Mission Hills neighborhood of Los Angeles. But things did not go as planned. Stilts was at some point struck over the left side of his head with a glass clock during the dispute. And in response, he grabbed his .3 caliber revolver which Carl attempted to wrestle from him. Their struggle caused the gun to go off, narrowly missing Stilts' 14-year-old stepson. Stilts would later claim that Carl had banged on the door and demanded to be let into the home, and then events played out as previously stated. After the gun went off, Stilts alleged that Carl then grabbed a knife and yelled, "I'm going to kill you." Afraid for his life, Stilts shot the 31-year-old, damaging an artery and causing massive internal bleeding. Carl was pronounced dead at the hospital. Tom Corrigan, Stilts' stepson who was almost shot that day, had a different version of events, however. He claimed that his stepfather shot Carl as he and his friend were leaving. Reportedly, Carl had turned to leave just after the gun went off during the struggle. Carl never wielded a knife or made any threats towards Stilts. However, Tom was never given the opportunity to testify during the coroner's inquest, and Stilts' account of events was accepted as fact. This was despite his prior conviction for perjury and several inconsistencies in the physical evidence that cast doubt on his story. Ultimately, the shooting was ruled an act of self-defense. Tom Corrigan, however, never wavered in his version of what transpired. Decades later, in February 2001, he told reporters that what happened was closer to murder than self-defense. He also revealed that after killing Carl, Stilts had threatened to kill Carl's friend as well. But before he could act, the sound of approaching sirens interrupted him. Tom firmly believes that the arrival of law enforcement is the only reason Carl's friend survived that night. Before I continue, I want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Now, let's move on with the video. Gilgo Oak Beach. The relentless crashing of waves and the eerie howling of the wind nearly drown out any conversation, or even the occasional screams of those at Gilgo Oak Beach, a secluded stretch of wetlands and sandy dunes off Ocean Parkway. This entire expanse, known as Jones Beach Island, falls under the jurisdiction of the nearby town of Babylon, and is primarily a tourist destination during the warmer months. However, absent from vacation brochures and boat rental advertisements is any mention of the fact that more than 16 bodies have been discovered, brutally murdered and buried across its beaches, marshes, and surrounding areas. For over a decade, visitors seeking relaxation and scenic photos at Gilgo Oak Beach remained largely unaware that a serial killer had been preying upon the community. Despite relentless efforts by internet sleuths and private investigators hired by victims' families to scour the treacherous landscape for leads, the serene setting seemed to conceal more mysteries than solutions. That changed in July 2023 when a long-awaited breakthrough finally brought new developments to light. The case of the Long Island serial killer remains active and ongoing. The first sign that a murderer was at large surfaced during the search for 24-year-old Shannon Gilbert, a sex worker who vanished following a frantic 911 call in May 2010. Although authorities failed to locate her body at the time, their investigation took a gruesome turn in December 2010 when 4 other corpses were unexpectedly uncovered along Ocean Parkway at Gilgo Oak Beach. It was Shannon's chilling 911 call, made just after midnight on May 1, 2010, that sparked the extensive search. While she was not found in the initial efforts, her desperate plea for help ultimately led to the exposure of multiple other victims. It all started on a stifling summer night when 23-year-old Shannon Gilbert, an escort, was on a client visit and made a brief phone call to her driver, Michael Pock. The call lasted 3 minutes, during which Shannon informed him that she had finished with her client in Manhattan and needed to be picked up. This arrangement was common among call girls in the city. Drivers acted as a form of external security, providing a safeguard for the often vulnerable, newly independent women who relied on them for transportation. In return, the drivers were compensated either with an hourly wage or a percentage of the escort's earnings. While the escorts engaged directly with clients, referred to in the industry as Johns, their drivers served as their lifeline to the outside world, ready to step in if needed. At 12:20 a.m., Shannon was contacted by another prospective client, reportedly through Craigslist, though Michael Pock never confirmed this to authorities. He later told police that he was unsure how the man, later identified as Joseph Brewer, had gotten Shannon's contact information but stated that the client, located in Long Island, had requested her services. By 2 a.m., Shannon and Pock arrived at Brewer's gated community, where the meeting was set to take place. Some have questioned why she accepted a call from such a remote location, as Ocean Parkway is over a 90-minute drive from Manhattan, an area that most escorts tended to avoid. Some believe that Shannon's visit involved more than just companionship, and a revealing slip from her driver suggested that drugs played a role in the encounter. During later police interviews, Michael Pock recalled that at some point during the meeting, Shannon and Joseph Brewer left the house to obtain, in his words, more drugs. The situation took an unexpected turn when Michael was later summoned inside Brewer's home after Shannon allegedly refused to leave, an unusual scenario for both the client and the driver. Upon entering the upscale yet disheveled residence, which bore the marks of frequent partying, Michael urged Shannon to leave. This moment was captured in a frantic 911 call Shannon made, a recording that remained undisclosed to the public for over a decade. In the distressing call, Michael Pock doesn't sound angry but rather confused as he pleads with Shannon to exit the home. The recordings indicate that he was attempting to convince her to leave and was offering to drive her back to New York City. Authorities ultimately ruled him out as a suspect, as he even acknowledged during the call that Shannon was speaking with police and appeared unconcerned by it, though clearly bewildered. While Michael did not display hostility towards Shannon for contacting law enforcement, one notable moment in the 23-minute call stood out. He reminded her that he had his gun with him. Whether the firearm was legally obtained or if he possessed a permit to carry it remains unclear. Given this uncertainty, it is perhaps unsurprising that Michael wished to avoid any police involvement that night. Supporters of the police decision to clear Shannon's driver early in the investigation argue that if he had any connection to the other victims, it would have surfaced long ago, given his proximity to Shannon during the recorded 911 call. The fact that authorities ruled him out suggests no links were found between him and the murdered sex workers. After Shannon's frantic call to 911, between 4 and 5 a.m., Gus Kleti, a resident of the same gated community where Joseph Brewer lived, had already begun his strict morning routine. While shaving, he suddenly heard desperate screams outside his home, Shannon's voice crying out, "Help me! Help me! They're going to kill me!" A well-mannered and inquisitive man, Gus opened his door and welcomed the distressed young woman inside, guiding her to a chair before immediately contacting the police himself. During his 911 call, Gus can be heard describing Shannon as looking no older than 14. While on the phone, he repeatedly urged her to explain what was wrong, but she simply stared at him in silence. As he tried to reassure her that help was on the way, Shannon suddenly bolted out of his home, seemingly unsettled by the fact that he had called 911, even though she had been speaking with emergency dispatchers herself just moments earlier. As she disappeared into the night, Gus noticed a black SUV driving erratically down the road, stopping at random intervals as if searching for someone. That vehicle was being driven by Michael Pock, who was desperately trying to locate Shannon after she had fled from Joseph Brewer's home. Moments after spotting the black SUV making erratic stops along the road, Gus noticed Shannon crouched beneath his boat, seemingly hiding from the vehicle. As she remained tucked away, the SUV's driver pulled up and asked Gus if he had seen her. Gus later recalled responding that he had and that he had already contacted the authorities. What unsettled him most, however, was Michael Pock's reaction. He allegedly replied, "You shouldn't have done that. She's going to get in a lot of trouble." Initially, this statement appeared ominous, but as more details emerged about Shannon's work as an escort, it seemed more reflective of the ongoing legal and societal challenges surrounding sex workers' rights. In New York City, sex work was illegal, though escorts were permitted to advertise their services under the guise of companionship or domestic roles like maids. However, any form of sexual exchange remained prohibited. After his brief exchange with Gus, Michael watched as Shannon, still visibly distressed, ran off toward the intersection of Sandy Drive, her figure vanishing into the dim pre-dawn darkness. Later, Michael claimed that he believed Shannon was angry with him and had chosen not to return with him, leading him to leave for New York City without notifying the police that she was missing. While Gus never saw Shannon again, his neighbors did. One of them, Barbara Brennan, became the next person Shannon reached out to, possibly drawn to her home due to its distinctiveness. Unlike the surrounding houses, Barbara's home was illuminated by a continuous vigil light, which she kept burning in memory of her late husband. When Shannon began pounding on Barbara Brennan's door, the startled homeowner chose caution over immediate aid. Rather than opening her door to a stranger in distress, she made 2 phone calls. The first, at approximately 5:22 a.m., was to the police. The second was to her neighbor, Tom Canning, who quickly arrived with his hunting dog. Their presence seemed to startle Shannon, who once again fled into the darkness, moving further away from the safety of civilization. This would be the last confirmed sighting of her alive. When officers arrived on the scene, they conducted a foot search for Shannon but ultimately decided against searching the marshlands, citing the high water level, an oversight that would later prove to be highly controversial. Initially, the Suffolk County Police Department's Missing Persons Bureau had requested the use of a cadaver dog, a German shepherd named Blue, to aid in the search. Throughout the summer of 2010, authorities frequently combed the area, hoping to locate Shannon. However, it was the dog's handler who persisted in his efforts, and on December 11, 2010, his determination finally led to a discovery, though not the one anyone had anticipated. Using statistical data from the FBI, which suggests that deliberately abandoned bodies are often found near roadways, Blue's handler redirected the search to a new location. In a shocking turn of events, Blue successfully uncovered 4 bodies over the course of 2 days. However, none of the remains belonged to Shannon, the original focus of the search. Due to the dense vegetation and a light layer of snow, previous human search efforts had overlooked the area. Yet Blue was able to detect a scent, leading his handler, Officer John Malia, to skeletal remains. These remains were found inside a deteriorated burlap sack and were later identified as those of Melissa Bartholomew. This discovery marked the beginning of a grim revelation. Within the next 48 hours, police unearthed 3 additional bodies along the stretch of Ocean Parkway. The victims had been discarded in an area shaped by relentless winds, shifting sands, and harsh coastal elements, making evidence collection a challenging task. Despite these conditions, investigators determined that the remains belonged to Moren Brainard Barnes, Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. Found within just 500 feet, 150 meters, of one another, they became collectively known as the Gilgo Four. While the discovery of the Gilgo Four was already a shock to the Long Island community, it was only the beginning. Over time, authorities would uncover more than 10 victims in the surrounding area, confirming their initial fear: there was a serial killer at large. Dominic Barone, then chief of detectives for the Suffolk County Police Department, emphasized the striking similarities among the Gilgo Four. Each victim shared physical traits, including a petite frame, hazel eyes, and a small stature. They also worked as call girls and used Craigslist to advertise their services. The chief further noted that the killer likely used online platforms such as Craigslist and Backpage to search for victims based on specific physical attributes. Later victims, Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack, discovered in 2011, also fit this distinct pattern. Beyond physical characteristics, the manner in which the bodies were disposed of pointed to a single perpetrator. Many of the remains were wrapped in or covered with burlap, a detail police have kept largely undisclosed but have acknowledged as a recurring element in the case. As call girls, all 4 victims led lives that required them to meet with strangers for money, a profession that, by necessity, demanded certain survival instincts. Yet, despite their precautions, they had all fallen prey to a predator who understood their vulnerabilities. While many of the victims advertised their services on platforms like Craigslist and Backpage, the final decision on whether to accept a job and how to handle the call ultimately rested with them. Detectives believe that the fact that 2 of the Gilgo Four left their phones behind suggests a possible level of trust with this particular client. Going to a job without a phone was highly unusual, making this detail especially significant. Moren Brainard Barnes was the first of the 4 women later discovered on Gilgo Beach to go missing. She was last heard from on July 9, 2007. In February of that year, Moren had called her friend Sarah, saying she had been robbed of all her cash but still had her phone. She asked Sarah, who lived in Connecticut, for a ride, but her friend was unable to pick her up. That call would be the last time anyone heard from Moren. Investigators suspect that Moren brought her phone with her on what would be her final job, and afterward, the killer may have accessed her contacts. Not long after her disappearance, Sarah received a call from an unfamiliar number, possibly from a burner phone, leading to speculation that the killer was attempting to make contact. The caller did not explain how he had obtained Sarah's number but mentioned her Connecticut area code, stating that he had recently interacted with a young woman from the same region. He claimed that Moren was alive and staying at a whorehouse in Queens. However, the man refused to give his name or a specific location, only saying that he would call back with an exact address. That second call never came. Despite efforts by the NYPD, no trace of Moren was found, and her phone remained inactive for over a year. Then, in February 2008, a surprising development occurred. Moren's phone connected with a Long Island cell tower near Fire Island, just a few miles from where her remains would later be discovered. Forensic experts determined that this ping was triggered when someone powered on her phone and accessed her voicemail. Given that this activity took place more than a year after Moren's presumed murder, investigators strongly suspect that it was the killer who had turned on her phone, causing it to register with the nearby tower. Following Moren's disappearance, The next victim in the Gilgo 4 to go missing was Melissa Bartholomew. Melissa had worked tirelessly to obtain her cosmetology license, harboring dreams of one day opening her own hair salon. Tragically, she went missing on July 10, 2009, 2 years after Maureen's disappearance, and about a year before Shannon vanished. Much like in Maureen's case, the killer exploited the victim's phone to reach out to a loved one. This time, he contacted Melissa's younger sister, Amanda Bartholomew, who lived in Buffalo, New York. However, in a disturbing shift from the anonymous calls made to Maureen's friend Sarah, the killer used Melissa's own phone to make contact. Seeing her sister's number on the screen, Amanda answered without hesitation, expecting to hear Melissa's voice. Instead, she was met with the chilling sound of a stranger, the very person responsible for her sister's disappearance. The calls, which only ever came in the evenings, left an indelible mark on Amanda's memory. Inexplicably, law enforcement never obtained recordings of these calls, but Amanda, just 16 at the time, vividly recalls the terror they instilled. The first words she heard from the sinister voice on the line still haunt her. "Is this Melissa's sister?" Amanda recalls the chilling moment when a man spoke in a low, menacing voice. She simply replied yes before he continued in a sinister tone, "Do you know what your sister is doing? She's a whore." On one occasion, Amanda's mother, Lynn, attempted to answer the calls herself, but the moment the killer heard her voice, he immediately hung up. Determined to document every unsettling encounter, Lynn kept a journal of the calls and later handed it over to investigators. However, despite this evidence, no viable leads emerged from the police investigation. Although the family promptly informed authorities about the repeated calls, law enforcement failed to act swiftly, delaying any attempt to trace or record them. Media reports vary on whether their efforts were ever successful. In a desperate bid for answers, Melissa's family turned to a trusted friend in law enforcement, which finally led to some insight into the call's origins. According to data obtained from the phone company, the killer's calls had pinged off at least 3 different cell towers. 2 were in New York City, one near Times Square and another near Madison Square Garden, while the third was in Oyster Bay, Nassau County. Notably, this last location was close to where Melissa was last confirmed to be alive, as she had previously checked her voicemail from that area. Some reports indicate that once police finally managed to set up a phone tracker, the killer outmaneuvered them yet again, ensuring that each of his taunting calls lasted less than 3 minutes, just short of the time needed for a proper trace. At the time, the available technology made it nearly impossible to trace a call lasting less than 3 minutes. Unfortunately, in February, a Buffalo television station irresponsibly broadcast details about law enforcement's tracing attempts and the locations of cell tower pings. Police suspected that the killer was following the case closely, as the calls immediately stopped after the report aired. This media leak inadvertently led him to exercise more caution, depriving investigators of any further opportunities to gather evidence through his taunting phone calls. Chronologically, the first 2 victims of the Gilgo 4, Moren Brainard Barnes and Melissa Bartholomew, had loved ones who were contacted and tormented after their disappearances. The presumed killer called Maureen's friend, Sarah, from an untraceable number, while he used Melissa's own phone to reach her younger sister, Amanda. However, the last 2 victims, Amber Costello and Megan Waterman, appeared to have been convinced to leave their phones behind before meeting the suspect. For call girls, it was highly unusual to go into a client's home without a means of communication, making this behavior particularly suspicious. Megan's mother strongly asserted that such an action was out of character for her daughter, as she was known to be extremely attached to her phone. This peculiarity led internet sleuths dedicated to the case to speculate whether the killer had used a specific excuse to convince the women to disconnect from the outside world. Some theorized that he might have claimed to suffer from a medical condition, such as a heart arrhythmia, and possibly had a pacemaker or similar device implanted, which could have been leveraged as an excuse to prevent phone usage. Some speculate that the killer may have used concerns about implanted heart devices to convince the victims to leave their cell phones behind. At the time, technology was believed to interfere with such devices, and patients were advised to keep cell phones at least 6 inches away from their implants while being cautious around strong electronic signals. Amber's male roommate recalled speaking with her before she left for what would be her final appointment. He encouraged her to bring her phone, but she was insistent that the client did not want her to have it. She did not offer further details on why this request was made, leaving lingering questions about what was said to persuade her. Those who support this theory argue that, whether the medical condition was real or fabricated, it could provide a plausible explanation for why the victims made the unusual decision to disconnect from the outside world. Megan Waterman was another victim who was convinced to leave her phone behind. She often took jobs at the direction of her boyfriend, Akeem Cruz, who went by the name Vibe and also acted as her pimp. He was responsible for placing online ads for her services, using a laptop to manage her appointments. Megan was last seen alive in CCTV footage at the Holiday Inn Express in Hauppauge, New York, wearing a yellow shirt as she walked through the hotel lobby. Before she left the premises, a witness last spotted Megan near a liquor store. This would be the last time that Megan was seen alive. Cops questioned her so-called handler Vibe and took possession of his laptop, but police say he is currently not a suspect. In March of 2011, just 3 months after the Google 4 had been located, the dismembered hands, forearms and skull of a then unidentified female were found along a nearby stretch of Ocean Parkway. These remains were eventually DNA matched to a torso in Manaville, a nearby town in Suffolk County back in February 2003. These remains were located 1 mile east of the original dump site. These body parts, separated by time and dump site, would later be identified as that of 20-year-old Jessica Taylor. Then on April 4, 2011, another school, a pair of hands and a right foot were found in a plastic bag near Ocean Parkway on Gilgo Beach. These remains would be designated as Jane Doe No. 6 until being linked by DNA to the Manaville Jane Doe. Similarly to the torso discovered in February 2003, another female torso had been discovered in February. The torso of a woman was found by hikers in the Long Island Pine Barrens in Manaville. It had been wrapped in plastic garbage bags and unceremoniously dumped in the woods near Halsey Manor Road. For many years, the identity of the owner of the torso was unknown, but almost a decade later in 2020, police announced that they had positively identified the Manaville Jane Doe as Valerie Mack, 24, born July 2, 1976. The same day, April 4, that the second female torso was found, police discovered 2 additional sets of skeletal remains, an unidentified female toddler, baby doe, and an unidentified Asian male who was small in stature and was reportedly donning female clothing. Police speculated that this unnamed male may have been mistaken for a woman by his killer. While adult females were dismembered, the lack of mutilation of the toddler and of the Asian male shows that there may have been an underlying sexual aspect to the mutilations, but not to the killings themselves. Perhaps the killings were done in order to get the victims to their preferred state. Police wondered if, for the killer, it was more about the destination than the journey. Detectives say that the dismemberment occurred in a particular manner of which the police have not released more details. Then on April 11, 2011, in what was becoming a sad and shocking pattern of death and mutilation, 2 more bodies were found in Nassau County. The first piece of remains found that day was the skull of an unidentified woman. True to the patterns beginning to emerge, the woman's dismembered legs had previously been discovered on Fire Island back in 1996. These remains would be referred to as Fire Island Doe. Police would eventually make the connection that this very island was the same island from which Gilgo 4 victim Moren Brainard Barnes' phone had last pinged. A gruesome geographic perimeter of attack was emerging. Just as in the first body found that morning, a portion of the remains of the second body found that day had also been previously uncovered, this time by a hiker on a beautifully deceptive spring day in 1997. The hiker accidentally stumbled upon an unidentified woman's dismembered torso wrapped inside a plastic bag and put in a Rubbermaid container. Seemingly of African American descent, the torso was found in Hempstead Lake Park, New York. This victim bore a distinctive tattoo of peaches arranged in a heart shape, thus she was nicknamed Peaches by investigating officers. These remains were later identified as the body of the mother of the unidentified toddler whose remains had been located in Suffolk County a few weeks prior, and who police had been referring to as Baby Doe. On November 29, 2011, police announced that they believed one person to be responsible for all 10 murders. They commented further that they believed the perpetrator was almost certainly a local from Long Island. Police disclosed that although cause of death was unable to be determined, the single killer theory stemmed from common characteristics of the victims, and they noted many similarities between the individual treatment of the bodies and the condition of the remains. Later, police would announce a $25,000 reward for information leading to an arrest in the Long Island murders, but to no avail. In February, Shannon Gilbert, the impetus to the original unearthing of countless remains, was finally found deceased in Oak Beach 19 months after her mysterious disappearance. Perplexing to both the public and the police, her purse and some of her clothes were found nearly half a mile from where her body was located. Police, in what many believe is an illogical theory, state that Shannon must have been panicked and cold and most likely had undressed herself before accidentally drowning. The true cause of her death is still contested, as state medical examiners claimed her death to be accidental, yet her family believes otherwise and refused to bury her. Their tenacity in uncovering the truth led to a legal battle which caused Shannon's remains to lay in the Suffolk County Medical Examiner's office for 4 years until she could be re-examined by another forensic scientist. A private and unbiased autopsy report states that Shannon's hide bone, a U-shaped bone in the throat area, was shattered, indicating a manual strangulation, as the hide bone is not able to be broken from natural forces. Shannon's hide bone was missing its so-called horns, the horn-shaped tips that make up the U-shape of the free-floating bone. Shannon's bones had been boiled so that state forensic anthropologists would be able to examine them. However, this caused the bones to be devoid of soft tissue, and by the time the independent medical examiner could investigate her body, there was no way to verify the possible presence of ligature marks, which would be leftover forensic artifacts of a manual strangulation. According to the FBI, manual strangulation is statistically the most common method of silencing women who are victims of a homicide. Another discrepancy in the condition of Shannon's remains as it relates to cause of death is the position in which Shannon was discovered. Shannon was found face up in the marshy area of Oak Park. However, normally drowning victims are found face down, as that is where the weight is distributed when the victims are allowed to free float. The stomach and the chest and the face go into the water because that is where the weight is distributed. Some critics of the one killer theory point to the variety of the disposal of the victims' bodies as a reason that more than one man may be involved. This is because some of the victims were found dismembered and others were found completely intact. Some were found wrapped with various substances such as plastic, burlap, or Rubbermaid Tupperware, while others were simply left to nature. Those who disagree with the single killer theory use this as evidence that separate killers may have been responsible. However, when it comes to serial killers, there is a common myth of consistency. While the behaviors, devices, or the morality mind games they play on themselves may be the same, the manner in which they choose to enact these fantasies can vary based on time, location, or intended victim, amongst other mitigating factors. Strangely enough, while mutilation was a factor in many of the female cases, the Asian male who was dressed as a woman and possibly transgender along with the baby was not mutilated in any way. This could hint at a possible motivation for the mutilation that far exceeds simply that of killing. Police wondered if taking away the victim's identity was part of the killer's goal in separating their bodies. He made it much harder for police in the late 90s and early 2000s to piece together the various homicides. This concern with keeping his victims nameless could be seen as an element of a power play in the killer's mind. FBI profilers have speculated that the killer may derive power knowing that the family and friends of those lost may never get closure. This power could deepen the thrill of the kill. The killer's phone calls exhibit a clear pattern of sadism, prolonging the suffering of his victims' loved ones. Some believe that he may also be responsible for the brutal murders of 4 sex workers whose bodies were discovered in a ditch behind the Golden Key Motel in West Atlantic City on November 20, 2006. These women were found roughly 1 year before the Gilgo 4 began disappearing, and the similarities between the cases are striking. A New York Post article even quoted an anonymous law enforcement official who stated, "It's the same guy," in reference to the resemblance between the 4 victims found in 2006 and those who vanished starting in 2007. Despite these potential connections, the investigation has been hindered by jurisdictional overlap. With multiple agencies involved, including the Suffolk County Police, Nassau County Police, New York State Police, and NYPD, the case has suffered from the classic issue of too many cooks in the kitchen, frustrating those seeking justice. The FBI later offered assistance, but in a surprising and hostile move, their help was rejected. This refusal came at a time when the man in charge of finding the killer, Suffolk County Police Chief James Burke, was embroiled in his own criminal scandal. Burke, the department's only 4-star ranking officer, had a reputation that stood in stark contrast to the responsibility his position required. His personal history was marred by allegations of drug use and involvement with sex workers, raising serious concerns about his ability, or willingness, to lead the search for a predator targeting escorts. According to the New York Times, prior to becoming the highest paid on the force as Suffolk County Police Chief, Burke had been found to have copulated with a sex worker who was known to be a heavy drug user. Early on in his career in law enforcement, Burke was found to be having a relationship with a prostitute who ended up stealing his service revolver. Burke had also previously confessed to having driven drunk numerous occasions while on the job. Ultimately, what finally got him arrested was when a low-level criminal broke into the police chief's SUV and in doing so unearthed a bag of intimate toys. In finding the robber, the police chief made the choice to physically torture the man for his misdeeds, which led to the chief's public sexual humiliation. Many cite Burke's numerous circumventions of the law as being related to Burke's professional and personal friendships with charged criminal and former District Attorney Thomas Spada, in whose office Burke had previously worked. One call girl later told Internal Affairs that she had been intimate with Burke at an Oak Beach sex party, which was coincidentally located just over 2 miles from the location of the later serial killer victims' bodies. Legislator and former cop Rob Trotta told the media in regards to Burke and his touting of the law, order, and common decency, quote, "He was a psychopath." Finally, in February, the now former police chief James Burke was sentenced to 46 months in federal prison for assault and conspiracy. While the investigation into his own personal life had been underway, Police Chief Burke had rejected any FBI offers of involvement on the serial killer case due to his own negative perceptions of the agents. So while the FBI had previously assisted in the search and profiling, they had failed to become officially a part of the investigation, and thus many resources went unutilized in the initial years of the case. But with Burke no longer in charge of the case, the FBI was invited to assist. In February, Suffolk County Police Commissioner Tim Sinai announced that the FBI had finally joined the investigation. The FBI had supplied a personality profile for the probable killer back in February 2011, which detailed the likely psychological map of the killer's life. The FBI surmised that the suspect was somewhere between his late 20s and mid-40s, that he was a white Caucasian male who likely had a girlfriend or was married, and that he was well-educated working a stable job. The FBI noted that it was possible that the man had been to the hospital for poison ivy treatment in the past, as he undoubtedly came in contact with the vine during his many travels in the Gilgo beach brush. This was surmised as investigators had to contend not only with the variable weather but also the heavy bush of the geography of the area, which was filled with poison ivy. During the search for more victims, some rescue workers later required prednisone treatments from the prolonged exposure to the poison ivy. The FBI profilers also cited that this suspect may have access to burlap sacks. Separately, the FBI posted on their Facebook page that they were seeking relatives and friends of a man named Elijah Legay Howell or Howard, who lived from 1927 until 1963. Mr. Howard previously lived in Pritchard, Alabama, and was married to a woman named Carrie. Investigators state that relatives of this man may be able to assist finding the identities of Peaches and her child. The post also asked if viewers recognized the peach tattoo on the body of the deceased mother. Strangely enough, in February, Marie Gilbert, Shannon Gilbert's mother, who was a constant presence in the inquiry into her daughter's death, was fatally stabbed by her younger daughter, 27-year-old Sarah Gilbert, who had been in and out of psychiatric hospitals since February 2014. It was reported that Shannon's sister had drowned a puppy prior to taking her own mother's life. The family attorney says that she suffered auditory and visual hallucinations a few years prior to the fatal stabbing. It is unclear if this mental health issue is hereditary or environmental in its origin, but it does potentially shed some new perspective on Shannon Gilbert's 9/11 call and frantic cries of impending doom. Some wonder with this new information if the 911 call does not show a woman in danger at all but someone in the thralls of their own mental health crisis, possibly hallucinating as her sister had started 2 years prior. If Shannon was falsely perceiving danger, then her initial 911 call would prove to be more of a red herring, as that would suppose that she was not actually in danger until she left the confines of the homes in the gated community and made her way into the dark marshes of the area. Such movement was reported by a neighbor who saw her walk off in the direction of the wetlands. If Shannon was not actually in danger and was instead having a mental health crisis, then her death may have been unrelated to the initial 911 phone call. Some wonder if Shannon's initial cry for help was simply an unfortunate coincidence which later led her face to face with her killer. Investigators still say that the Gilbert case is unrelated to the other bodies, but those close to the case take umbrage with such assertions, as they say her body being found in such close proximity to the other victims shows a clear link. In February of 2022, authorities put together a special team known as the Gilgo Beach Homicide Task Force. Comprised of investigators from the local, state, and federal levels, this task force embarked on a focused investigation into the cell phone records of the many victims during their final days. The call records showed that during the days leading up to their going missing, the women had received calls from 2 main locations, Midtown Manhattan and Massapequa Park. The team got the breakthrough they needed when they were finally able to locate a Chevrolet Avalanche truck which resembled the one described by Amber Costello's roommate Dave Schaller. Amber's roommate recounted seeing this very vehicle outside their residence the day before her disappearance. Previously, in September of 2010, Amber's roommate recalled that he had returned home to find Amber seeking refuge in the bathroom while an imposing, quote, Frankenstein-like man threatened her. Her roommate told police that he had engaged in a confrontation with a stranger who eventually departed in a truck. Following this incident, a witness, possibly Schaller or another individual, it is not noted in media reports, reported observing a similar truck pass by the home the following day shortly after Amber had left to meet a client. Her roommate communicated this information to the police that December of 2010, disclosing details about both the man and his vehicle, using Schaller's description as a guide and pulling the vehicle's registration history. The task force reportedly honed their focus into the owner of the Chevy Avalanche, a man named Rex Heuermann. Then on July 13, 2023, the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office announced that they had arrested Rex Heuermann in connection with the Gilgo Beach murders. Rex Heuermann, a prominent New York architect, was indicted by a grand jury on 6 counts of murder in connection to 3 of the 4 deaths of the woman dubbed the Gilgo 4. Brought up on 3 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of second-degree murder, Heuermann is alleged to have directly contributed to the deaths of Melissa Bartholomew in February 2009, Megan Waterman in 2010, and Amber Costello in that same year. He is also the prime suspect in the murder of a 4th woman, Moren Brainard Barnes, who was last seen alive in February 2007 and is another supposed victim of the so-called Long Island serial killer. In the weeks after his summertime arrest, the media scrambled to learn everything they could about the suspect. Little is publicly known about Rex Heuermann, 59, married and a father of 2. He is employed at a prestigious New York City design firm in Manhattan, and everyone who knew him says he had them fooled. In 2022, Heuermann engaged in a professionally filmed question-and-answer session with Bonjour Realty, which was posted to YouTube but is now set to private. In the interview, he told the host that he was born and raised on Long Island. He went on to say that he has worked in Manhattan since 1987. When asked to describe his job, he said, "I'm an architect. I'm an architectural consultant. I'm a troubleshooter." Heuermann, now remanded without bail, lived in a quiet neighborhood in Long Island, just a short drive from the location the bodies were found. After his arrest and grand jury indictment, media reports say that he tearfully insisted to his attorney that he is not the killer. Evidence released by police to the media detailed the long and exhaustive investigation that went into Heuermann's arrest. After confirming that Rex Heuermann was the owner of a Chevrolet Avalanche truck, authorities began to stake out his home in early 2022. The house is situated on the corner of 1st and Michigan Avenue and is otherwise unremarkable in its presentation. It seems small and rundown, which is not in line with the image of wealth and luxury that Heuermann seemed to enjoy presenting. They also monitored his office at 385 5th Avenue in Manhattan. Police were able to legally take a crust of pizza from the architect's garbage can, and from that pizza crust they were able to create a DNA profile. Taking items from the curbside garbage is a surprisingly common tactic police utilize when suspects refuse to provide DNA or when no sample can be procured without tipping off the target. Investigators say the reason for the delay in the genetic analysis of the hairs found on the victims is due to the fact that the hairs originally found in 2010 were degraded and DNA testing at the time could not yield results. However, improvements in DNA acquisition technology eventually gave investigators the answers they needed. After creating a genetic profile from the discarded food, police compared it to the profile taken from the strand of hair that was left on one of the victims, Megan Waterman. In 2010, during the initial examination of one of the victim's skeletal remains and materials discovered in the grave, the Suffolk County Crime Laboratory recovered a hair from a male on the bottom of the burlap. Additionally, hair believed to be from Rex Heuermann's wife was found on or near 3 of the murder victims. Prosecutors allege in the bail application that this is transfer evidence, and therefore not indicative of his wife's presence at the crime scene. Evidence shows that Heuermann's wife and children were outside of the state at the times when the 3 women were killed. At the time Melissa went missing in February, Heuermann's wife was in Iceland. Similarly, in 2010, she was on a trip to Maryland during the time when Megan Waterman went missing, and in what was a persistent pattern, in September of that same year, his wife traveled to New Jersey around the exact same time that Amber was last seen. The DNA from the hair was matched to Heuermann's wife using 11 different bottles acquired from the inside of a garbage can outside the Heuermann home. The town of Massapequa had long been a focus of the investigation as an unidentified male reportedly harassed the family of one of the victims, Melissa Bartholomew, following her February 2009 disappearance. Records show an unknown male calling and texting the family using Bartholomew's phone. It was not until February 2011 that police were able to triangulate the killer's sadistic calls. Using the tracing of cell phone pings, police were able to learn that the cell phone was being used in the vicinity of Manhattan, sometimes made from Times Square and other times near Madison Square Garden. Other calls were made from Massapequa itself. Many in the community say they were shocked to learn that the supposed killer was in fact hiding in plain sight throughout the entire investigation. Rex Heuermann was known to be a professional and family man. Heuermann worked in a job which required him to not only engage with high-level clients but also to network at some of the most exclusive New York events. While the marital and family status of the supposed killer surprised many in the true crime community, the FBI's original profile created by forensic psychologists detailed that they thought the killer seemed the type to have a long-term partner. As such, his being married is not completely out of the realm of what law enforcement hypothesized. Visually imposing, Heuermann is described by those who have met him as a large, tall man. One person who interacted with him on a professional level said that he had the characteristics of, quote, an ogre. Reflecting on the suspect's physical attributes, the Suffolk County District Attorney said that he, quote, clearly selected tiny women, people he really wanted to dominate. While executing a search warrant on the father of two's ornate home, a doll was found and taken into police possession. While no public details of the origin of the doll have been closed, those close to the case say the item may have been taken from the burial sites of the Gilgo, for as in years past, many mourners elected to place dolls and other tokens at the initial location the bodies were found. While the doll may be unrelated to the murders and simply a possession of the architect's or family member, some wonder if it may be some sort of trophy. While speculations abound, many in the community hope that more information will be released as to the items uncovered in the suspect's home and the timeline leading to his arrest. Previously, John Bytrolf, a carpenter living in Manaville, was thought to possibly be responsible for the unsolved Long Island cases. He was eventually connected by DNA evidence in the 2014 killings of two street workers, Rita Tangaretti and Colleen McNamee. Though he was not specifically connected to the Gilgo 4 nor the other remains on the beach path, some involved in Bytrov's arrest observed the similarities in both victims' chosen professions, as both sets of victims had been involved in the escort business on Craigslist and other classified websites. Notably, the phrase John Bytolf had been typed into a Google search bar by Heuermann himself. It is listed as number 14 in an inventory of evidence recovered by digital forensic technicians. Bytolf's method of killing was to inflict blunt force trauma through his bare fists, as opposed to the strangulation experienced by a majority of the victims on the beach. Police point to additional differences in the criminal's modus operandi, specifically concerning the burial ground chosen for Bytrov's victims, who were left on the side of the road and not buried on the beach. With merely rumors connecting Bytrov to the Gilgo 4, he was arrested for the two murders to which police could conclusively link him, and in 2017, he was convicted to 50 years to life in prison. According to the state's response to Heuermann's bail application, an application which was later denied, the since convicted Bytrov was one of the over 200 search terms catalogued by forensic technicians made in relation to the Gilgo Beach case. Also noted by police to provide context to the killings were thousands of explicit Google searches and queries into nearby escorts. Reportedly, he remained Google searched phrases such as, quote, "Why did law enforcement fail to trace calls made by the Long Island serial killer?" And quote, "Why hasn't the Long Island serial killer been captured?" Additionally, searches for new phone technology as a potential breakthrough in the case were located on his computer. One Google search made by Heuermann was for a gay male of Asian descent, specifically with delicate characteristics, although the terminology he used was far less informal. Detectives saw this as a possible connection, as one of the bodies that was found along Ocean Parkway was an Asian male in female's clothing. The victim has still not been identified but is described as a young biological male found wearing items normally attributed to a female. Law enforcement believed the victim had been dead for about 5 years when he was eventually found in April of 2011. After releasing a composite sketch to the media, police are asking the public for help in identification. Those close to the case who wish to remain unidentified say that after seeing the thousands of explicit Google search results, that Heuermann's status as the parent of a young daughter is alarming. In August 2023, the Gilgo Beach Task Force identified the victim, previously known as Fire Island Jane Doe, as 34-year-old Karen Vergata, who was last seen on February 14, 1996. At a press conference, Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney revealed that investigators had obtained a DNA profile suitable for genealogical comparison in August 2022, which ultimately led to her identification. Vergata, an escort at the time of her disappearance, remains the subject of an ongoing murder investigation. However, authorities have clarified that they are not naming Rex Heuermann as a suspect in her case, as her death occurred nearly 15 years before the murders of the Gilgo 4. While Heuermann has yet to be charged in connection with Shannon Gilbert's death or the other unidentified Gilgo Beach victims, police have acknowledged the possibility that he could be linked to additional cases. Some speculate that the recently arrested architect may also be responsible for other murders outside the known Long Island serial killer list cases. Investigators are examining potential connections between Heuermann and other unsolved killings, including those attributed to an unidentified killer known as the Manaville Butcher. Additionally, authorities are exploring links to a series of strangulation murders committed by a suspect referred to as the Eastbound Strangler, as both cases involve the targeted killings of young women. Even with Heuermann behind bars, uncertainty remains regarding whether multiple killers could be responsible for the victims found in and around Gilgo Beach. Initially, police believed as many as 8 murders were the work of a single individual, but they now acknowledge the possibility that 2 or more serial killers could have been operating independently in the same area. Investigators continue to analyze evidence to determine whether all of the victims can be definitively linked to a single perpetrator or if additional threats still linger in the community. Moving on to the next case. Tammy Zawicki, In the days leading up to 21-year-old Tammy Zawicki's disappearance, she experienced ongoing car trouble. A student at Grinnell College in Grinnell, Iowa, Tammy had spent her summer studying in Madrid, Spain. As summer break came to an end, she and her brother embarked on a road trip from their home in New Jersey back to their respective schools. Their journey included a stop in Pittsburgh to visit family before heading to Evanston, Illinois, where Darren, her brother, attended university. Tammy planned to continue the remainder of the trip to Grinnell alone. However, throughout their travels, her white Pontiac experienced multiple mechanical failures. Darren believed he had resolved the issue, and they arrived in Illinois on August 22, 1992. After staying overnight with a friend, Tammy prepared to set out on her solo journey. Before she left, Darren gave the engine one last check before waving her off. Tammy didn't get far before her Pontiac started acting up again. Over 60 witnesses reported seeing her inspecting the vehicle's engine that afternoon near mile marker 83 on Interstate 80 in central Iowa. During this time, approximately 26 motorists stopped to check on her, but none could confirm what happened next. Tammy never made it to Grinnell. She had planned to call her parents upon arrival, but when they failed to hear from her, they grew concerned. After several unsuccessful attempts to reach her, they reported her missing. By the time authorities launched an investigation several days later, her car had already been towed. Due to a mishandling of evidence, it could not be processed for fingerprints. However, investigators found no visible signs of struggle, and Tammy's belongings, including her handbag and camera, remained inside. Soon, eyewitnesses began coming forward. One particularly notable testimony came from Robert Bullington, an Iowa truck driver, who claimed to have seen Tammy getting into a gray Chevrolet Celebrity driven by an unknown man. Bullington even spoke with the driver, who allegedly explained that Tammy's car had overheated. Bullington subsequently advised the man to stop at a truck stop in LaSalle, but no witnesses could place Tammy at the truck stop. Other witnesses placed a tractor-trailer truck next to the Pontiac when she was last seen at around 3:10 and 4 o'clock that afternoon. The truck has been described as having a faded rusty orange strip around the center, while the driver was dark-haired, white, around 6 foot tall, and between the ages of 35 and 40. Tammy's body was recovered on September 1, 1992. She was badly decomposed and on the side of a rural stretch of Interstate Highway 44 in Lawrence County, Missouri. She was identified through dental records and still wore the clothing she had on when she vanished. Her body was discovered by a trucker who'd pulled over to the side of the road, stating at different times that he had done so to urinate or to pull tarp over the truck bed in preparation for the rain. He noticed a foul smell upon exiting his vehicle and soon found the remains. Tammy had been wrapped in a red blanket and had been stabbed 7 to 8 times. Her post-mortem noted that the wounds had been made in a circle around her heart, which was most unusual, and that they'd been made using a small sharp object which had led to internal bleeding. Though her clothing was intact, some reports, including one from the FBI, report that Tammy was sexually assaulted before her death. Her watch was missing from the scene. It played the tune of Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head and had a green umbrella on its face. Investigators have theorized that Tammy was killed elsewhere and that the perpetrator drove her across Illinois and into Missouri before dumping her body 500 miles from where she vanished. In the days following the discovery of the body, a task force was established, mix of local authorities and FBI agents. In the subsequent weeks, they identified several suspects, the most notable of which was Lonnie Bierbrot, a trucker and convicted felon who was out on parole at the time of Tammy's death. He was questioned in early 1993, and investigators discovered that he had gifted his wife with a watch that looked similar to the one missing from Tammy's body. Furthermore, he was identified by a witness as the man she saw near Tammy's Pontiac on the day of her disappearance, and he lived not far from where the body was located in September. However, he could never be linked physically to the case. The watch he reportedly gifted his wife was never found, and he passed away in February 2002. Over the years, several other potential suspects emerged, but all were ultimately ruled out. For decades, Tammy's case remained largely stagnant, until renewed interest from podcasters, amateur sleuths, and her devoted family sought to bring fresh attention to her disappearance. In 2020, authorities arrested serial killer Clark Perry Baldwin, who was linked to the murders of 3 women between 1983 and 1997 across Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, and Nevada. Following his capture, a retired investigator suggested that Tammy's case bore similarities to Baldwin's known crimes, leading to speculation that he could be responsible for her death. Despite this theory, law enforcement has publicly stated that Baldwin is not considered a suspect in Tammy's case. Her murder remains unsolved. If you have any information about Tammy Zawicki's case, please contact the Illinois State Police at 815-726-6377 or the FBI's Chicago office at 312-421-6700. Tips can also be submitted anonymously via the FBI's website at tips.fbi.gov, https://tips.fbi.gov. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video, and remember, the search for truth never stops.